I'm a licensed P in New York State. I'm just going to give you basically just a quick overview um, of what I do in terms of plumbing code review, design review, um, to give you guys a better sense, or I want to say comfort level in terms of what you need to submit and what I look for. Brian, please, next slide. So basically what I show here is are the codes, generally speaking, that we work with. As you all probably know, Port Authority operates in three jurisdictions, that being New York City, New Jersey, and New York State. Um, as you see here in New York City, I typically work with the 2022 New York City Building Code, 2022 New York City Fuel and Gas Code, and the 2022 New York City Plumbing Code. In New Jersey, we have the 2021 International Building Code, New Jersey edition, the 2021 International Fuel and Gas Code, and the 2021 National Standard Plumbing Code, New Jersey edition. Next slide, please. In New York State, it would be the 2020 New York State Building Code, as well as the 2020 New York State Plumbing Code. And currently, we are using the 2025 TCRM. Previously, it was a 2023, but if you are submitting from, I guess, here on out, you should be making reference to the 2025 TCRM. Next slide, please. So generally speaking, any of your work that you do perform will fall into one of these categories. And I basically spelled out here where you have different work types: minor additions, alterations, or repairs. Um, Irregardless of which category you fall into, they shall comply with the current code provisions unless left in the same arrangement and not hazardous. Um, if your work falls under a minor addition or alteration, needs to be submitted. Now, I want to clarify that minor repairs are typically submitted to the facility because they have their own process in terms of what is required, particularly from the contractor. I can't really speak to that. That would be from the facility side. So I just want you guys to make a mental note of that minor repairs have to be submitted to the facility, again, because they have their own process in terms of what needs to be done. They don't require a TAA submission. Again, we look at anything outside of that, but typically a minor repair or situation such as that requires that you work through the facility. I give an example here. I'm removing a toilet, replacing with a new one. Typically not required to be submitted for a TAA, but shall be required to go to the facility for authorization. Again, because they have their own paperwork process that they typically require. Next item, if I'm relocating a fixture to a new location, again, in this situation, you're cutting into pipe, and in that situation, you would need to submit that to us for review. And the next bullet point, as far as your submissions are concerned, if you're making modifications that involve plumbing fixture counts, prior code buildings have the option to use either the 1968 or current 2022 New York City Plumbing Code. Next slide, please. As far as my review is concerned, I also look at the materials that you put in your specifications. So it needs to be submitted specific to the actual jurisdiction that you're doing the work in. I focus primarily here on New York City, but if, for example, you're doing work in New York State or New Jersey, you need to submit your specifications specific to that, because each jurisdiction, although similar, they have specific specifications in terms of materials are concerned. Again, I focus on New York City. I give you the bullet points here for example, sanitary and vent systems. Your tables are the New York City Plumbing Code, Table 702.1 and 702.2. We also have, it's a typo here, but it should be 2025 TCRM, but we also have another requirement for PVC not permitted above ground within buildings. I do want to clarify that because generally speaking, PVC in New York City is only permitted, or any type of plastic material is only permitted within residential occupancies. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any residential occupancy within the Port Authority. So that's another emphasis. It just happened to be in the TCRM, so bear that in mind. But why I'm mentioning this is just because PVC will not be an option for you to use at all if you're not dealing with a residential occupancy. So keep that in mind. Um, with stormwater systems, um, we have these applicable tables again. Table 702.1, 702.2, and 1102.4. Domestic water systems, tables 605.4 as well as 605.5. Next slide, please. The next item that I do look at as well are the plumbing fixtures. So as it relates to your scope of work, you need to show that in a fixture schedule. So for example, let's say you're dealing with a scope of work that involves an office space that's dealing with a battery of water closets. You need to, and you're replacing them. You need to show that in your um, fixture schedule. I need to see the make and model, the type, um, especially the flow rates, because that there are requirements for less water consumption. So you need to show that. If you have a new system, you need to show the summation of loads. And again, these are for newer systems. Typically, I don't require you to provide that information in the event that you have an existing piping. For example, if it's an existing 4-inch line and you're doing some relocations and you're adding new fixtures to an existing 4-inch line, typically you don't have to show that. But in an event that you are putting in a newer system, a newer building, a newer structure, a newer alteration in general, you need to show summation of your loads. This also applies to water heaters. How did you come up with the size of the actual water heater, right? You need to provide calculations for that. I also look at the location of discharge piping from the temperature and pressure relief valve. That's typically done via indirect waste, which I'll talk about in further slides. But that's typically done through indirect waste. You need to show where you're piping that to. So you need to show basically what your scope of work is and be as clear as possible. With water heaters and especially with hot water, if you're in a situation, for example, where the furthest distance it exceeds 20 feet in New York City, 100 feet in New Jersey, you need to show how you're maintaining the water temperature. You have a number of different ways to do that. You can make reference to the code, but just generally speaking, it can be done via either heat tracing or recirculation of the hot water. And I give you the applicable code sections there. Next slide, please. I also look at backflow prevention, and typically your backflow preventers will fall into one of these two categories, your primary or your secondary. And with your primary, that is approved by the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, DEP. For all of you who are not familiar, but it's approved by them. We don't provide that approval. So if you're submitting a project to us that happens to be in this particular New York City jurisdiction, make sure you have submitted those documents beforehand, because if I haven't received any approval of that particular device, it will be an outstanding comment, and the comment will not be closed until I've received the approval. it can take anywhere from 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks to get an approval. So it's in your best interest to submit that ahead of time, even before submitting those documents, your uh, TAA documents to us. Try to submit that beforehand because it takes time before you get an approval. I also look at secondary backflow prevention, which includes anything from air gaps, vacuum breakers, double check valves. Um, they serve different types of equipment. It could be cappuccino machines, coffee makers, pumps, dishwashers. I also look at indirect waste. Um, there are specific requirements for indirect waste, meaning um, discharge is not, as I indicate here, not via a hard connection to a sanitary system. Um, there are requirements for that as far as which devices do require to have that. Um, it can be food handling equipment, um, you know, clear water waste, like for example from a sprinkler system, standpipe system. These are specific requirements, and if you're not showing them, they can be comments that I'll make in your review. Next item I look at is grease waste interceptors and oil separators. And basically what I put here, just to give you a summation, if you have any discharge that is detrimental or can harm sewer pipes or cause harm to the sewer, it cannot discharge directly into the sewer. Specifically with grease waste interceptors, um, there is a sizing chart that is used to size that equipment. So if you're utilizing a grease waste interceptor in any of your designs, particularly you find them in kitchens, but if you're utilizing a grease waste interceptor, make sure that the associated calculations along with that particular equipment is shown, not just the actual schedule for that grease waste interceptor, but the sizing, how you came up with the actual size of the grease waste interceptor. Next slide, please. The next item I look at includes gas piping. And again, for purposes of this presentation, I focus primarily on New York City, but the requirements are all the same. Any new piping to any type of equipment, you need to show your calculations, how you determine your pipe sizes, indicate your assumed pressures, pressure drop, and total CFH. The next item I look at is permanent sanitary and water connections. And why is this, I'm pointing this out is because we have a lot of situations where we have temporary structures, primarily trailers. Irregardless, you're required to um, have either a permanent sanitary or domestic water connection. And I basically summarize it here. Every building in which plumbing fixtures are installed shall have drainage piping and shall be connected to the sewer. The next is potable water. Every structure equipped with plumbing fixtures and utilized for human occupancy shall be provided with potable water. There are exceptions, and that's basically limited to construction trailers. And when I say construction trailers, basically that means that there is no other activity um, going on with the trailer, meaning there's no business, office activity. You couldn't have a trailer, for example, with a drafting table or computers or someone answering a phone. That would not be considered a construction trailer. Um, so in that instance, yes, they do not require permanent sanitary or water connections. Um, Porta Johns would be acceptable. Next slide, please. And the next item I look at would be storm drainage. You have the sizing basically of your vertical and horizontal drains, as well as secondary drains. For those of you who are designing in New York City, I want to point out that the tables have changed. In the previous edition of the plumbing code, the square footage was used to determine the sizing of the lines. As of the 2022 New York City plumbing code, it's a GPM requirement. So if you're submitting newer submissions, um, don't refer to the old table because that will be a comment. You need to size your system based on the new tables that are being provided within the New York City plumbing code. And then the last item, I talk about flood hazard resistance. A lot of our structures fall into flood hazard areas. So in your design, when you're doing your code analysis, and if you do fall into these areas, um, make that as part of your submission and your design. And this can include anything from vents, fresh air intakes off of the vent system, um, the installation of backwater valves. So, these are the things that I basically typically look at as part of the submission that you submit to us. Um, again, as Steve and Juan pointed out, um, your success is our success. We look to assist you with basically submitting, code compliant designs, um, minimal comments. Again, as I outlined here, these are basically the high level things that I look at as far as your submissions are concerned. Again, keep in mind that your specifications should be specific to your jurisdiction. So again, if you're doing work in New York State, submit to us for New York State. If you're doing work in New York City, New York City. If it's New Jersey, New Jersey. Um, I think that's it. Brian, questions?
That is correct.